Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to break down a sermon that puts a 2,000-year-old Christian prayer head-to-head with the big ideas that basically built our modern world.
All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the prayer itself, what it actually says. Then, we'll jump into three thinkers who completely changed the game. And finally, we'll see how the sermon pits this ancient prayer against their modern ideas. It's a pretty fascinating showdown.
So the whole thing really kicks off with this one specific instruction. It's from the Apostle Paul, writing to his right-hand man, Timothy, and you can find it in the Christian scriptures.
Okay, so when you first hear this, it might sound, well, pretty simple, right? Pray for everyone. But the sermon's big point is that back then this was a huge deal. The idea of praying for literally all people was totally radical. And packed inside that simple phrase is this massive theological statement about who we are and what God is like.
And then, bam, the sermon does a massive time jump. We leap forward to the 19th century. And the argument is that three specific thinkers completely rewired how we see everything, ourselves, our society, our spot in the cosmos, you name it. They basically laid the groundwork for the world we're all living in today.
So who are these guys? Yep, it's the big three: Darwin, Marx, and Freud. The sermon calls them the architects of the modern mind. Think about it. One changed how we see nature, another changed how we see each other, and the last one changed how we see, well, ourselves. So, let's dig into this, starting with Darwin.
All right, first up to bat is Charles Darwin. And the point here isn't just about the science of evolution, no. The sermon argues his work sparked this huge philosophical earthquake. It completely changed how we, as a species, thought about our own importance.
And this slide just lays it out so clearly. Look at the before and after. The argument is we went from seeing ourselves as, God's special creation, stewards of the earth, made in his image, to basically being the winners of a cosmic biological tournament. Our specialness wasn't from a divine plan anymore. It was because we were simply the smartest, toughest animal to crawl out of the primordial soup.
And this is the absolute key takeaway. Survival of the fittest wasn't just a biological theory. It became a worldview. Life, from the smallest microbe to human society, was now seen as one giant, relentless competition. It's all about self-preservation, about winning. Those weren't just impulses anymore. They were the basic rules for how everything works.
Okay, so if Darwin applied the idea of struggle to nature, the sermon says our next thinker, Karl Marx, took that same exact logic and applied it straight to us, to human society.
See, for Marx, the most important thing about you wasn't your nationality or your religion. It was your economic class. He saw all of history as a story of conflict between these classes, the haves and the have-nots. It's like he built an us versus them engine right into the heart of how society works.
And in this view, literally everything, politics, laws, culture, even your beliefs, is just a weapon in that big economic war. The sermon really hammers this home. In a Marxist world, your primary job is to fight for your side, to protect your group's interests, period. And that brings us to our third and final thinker, Sigmund Freud. So Darwin looked at our place in nature, Marx looked at our place in society, and Freud, well, he turned the microscope inward. He wanted to redefine our relationship with our own minds.
Now this was a total bombshell for the old idea that humans are these perfectly rational beings. Freud came along and said, not so fast. He argued that what's really driving the bus are all these hidden desires, these primal instincts and fears that we're not even aware of. This, he said, is the subconscious mind, this dark inner continent.
And the implication here is pretty staggering. The sermon points out that, according to Freud, even when we think we're being good or noble, it might just be a fancy costume hiding our deep-seated insecurities and selfish urges. You can't get rid of that inner darkness. All you can really hope to do is manage it.
So let's just pause and take stock. We've got a world that's just a brutal competition, a society that's locked in endless conflict, and a mind that you can't even trust. It's kind of bleak, right? And this is where the sermon makes its big move, offering up a theological answer to this whole modern mess.
And this is where we circle all the way back to that ancient prayer from the beginning. The speaker argues this isn't just some nice, fluffy sentiment. No, it's presented as a direct, powerful challenge to the entire worldview built by Darwin, Marx, and Freud.
Let's start with Darwin. The contrast is just night and day. Darwin's world is built on survival of the fittest, competition, self-preservation. But Paul's instruction to pray for all people? That's a completely different operating system. It's based on this radical idea of expansive love, this belief that God actually wants everyone to be saved, not just the strongest.
Now, against Marx, it gets even crazier. Paul doesn't just say, hey, pray for folks in general. He gets super specific. Pray for kings and those in authority. And you have to remember who was in charge back then. The sermon reminds us the emperor was probably Nero, a guy who was actively persecuting Christians. So the command is to pray for the well-being of your enemy, your oppressor. It completely shatters that us versus them logic.
And finally, how does this prayer answer Freud? Well, this is interesting. The sermon says Christianity actually agrees with Freud's diagnosis. Yep, there's a real darkness inside us. Christians call it sin. But where they disagree is on the cure. Freud basically says, good luck managing that for the rest of your life. The Christian message says, no, that darkness can actually be healed, redeemed, and transformed through a mediator.
So in the end, the sermon just lays it all out there. It's a choice between two completely different stories about who we are. Are we just advanced animals in a brutal competition, locked in social warfare with a dark, untrustworthy mind? Or is there another story? One about universal love, about a grace that can bridge any divide, and about the real possibility of redemption? The sermon leaves us with that question, suggesting that the story we choose to live in is the world we'll end up building.